The late afternoon sunlight poured through the wide, clean windows of a children's rehabilitation center in Florida, casting a warm golden hue over the room. Inside, the hum of determination filled the air. The gentle chatter of medical staff mixed with the sound of equipment in use and the occasional bursts of encouragement from therapists working with young patients. Each child in the room was there for a reason: to reclaim what life had taken from them, to fight against limits imposed by circumstances they couldn't control. It was a place where resilience thrived and hope lingered, even in the face of hardship. Into this room, with its unique blend of quiet struggle and steadfast resolve, walked former President Donald Trump. His entrance, though unannounced to the children, seemed to shift the energy of the space. As he stepped in, the staff greeted him warmly, and his presence immediately commanded attention, not just because of his status, but because of the aura of genuine interest he exuded as he scanned the room. Trump's gaze swept over the scene before him. Young fighters tackling their therapies with determination, some with smiles, others with gritted teeth. His eyes softened as he noticed the therapists gently encouraging their patients, clapping for each small victory. But his attention was drawn to a corner of the room, where one boy sat alone, almost motionless, in a worn wheelchair. The boy's name was Ethan. At just 12 years old, he had already endured more pain than most adults could imagine. A devastating car accident had taken away the use of his legs and, along with it, much of his spirit. His face, thin and pale, seemed far too serious for a child his age, and his bright eyes, once full of life, now flickered faintly, as if holding on to the last embers of hope. He sat there, quietly watching the room, but not really engaging with it. To him, the bustling energy of therapy sessions felt like a world apart, one that no longer belonged to him. Since the accident, Ethan's life had become a series of gray, monotonous days, each one blending into the next. He often found himself staring out the window, imagining what it would be like to run again, to play without restrictions. But each time the thought came, it was quickly replaced by the cold reality of his wheelchair, of the weight he now carried every single day. Trump noticed the boy's stillness, the way his hands gripped the armrests of his wheelchair as if they were his lifeline. There was a heaviness in Ethan's posture, something that spoke of a boy far too young to have given up hope, but who was dangerously close to doing so. Curious eyes turned toward Trump as he made his way through the room. The children who were working through their exercises smiled shyly, some waving timidly as he passed. But Ethan didn't move. He kept his head bowed, his gaze fixed on the floor, unwilling, or perhaps unable, to acknowledge the commotion around him. Trump, however, didn't rush. He took his time, greeting the children and listening to the therapists as they explained the different challenges each patient faced. The former president nodded thoughtfully, offering kind words of encouragement to each child he spoke with. But as he moved closer to Ethan, the boy's quiet presence seemed to command his full attention. Stopping a few feet away, Trump paused, taking in the sight of the young boy. His instinct told him that Ethan wasn't like the others in the room. The other children were fighting visibly, pushing their bodies, testing their limits. But Ethan's battle was internal, and it was one he seemed on the verge of losing. Slowly, Trump approached, his movements measured and deliberate. He crouched slightly to bring himself to Ethan's level, careful not to startle the boy. Ethan hesitated, his small hands tightening their grip on the wheelchair's armrests. For a moment, it seemed as though he might not look up at all. But then, with an almost imperceptible shift, Ethan raised his head. His eyes, deep and shadowed, met Trump's. In that instant, something flickered, a glimmer of curiosity, a faint spark of light that had been hidden beneath layers of sadness and resignation. It wasn't Trump's title that captured Ethan's attention. nor the fact that he was a public figure. It was the way Trump looked at him, not with pity, but with genuine interest, as if Ethan were the most important person in the room at that moment. For the first time in what felt like ages, Ethan felt seen, not as a disabled boy in a wheelchair, but as someone who still had a story worth hearing. Trump didn't speak right away. He simply smiled, a warm, steady expression that said, "Take your time." And in that brief silence, a fragile but undeniable sense of connection began to form between them. It was as though, in a room full of sound and motion, they had found a quiet space of their own, where hope could begin to take root once again. Trump pulled up a chair and sat down beside Ethan, his movement deliberate and calm. His gaze, soft yet deeply focused, revealed the compassion that had been building in him since he entered the room. As the staff began to recount Ethan's story, Trump leaned in slightly, his attention unwavering. He nodded occasionally, absorbing every detail they shared. They told him about the accident, a devastating event that had forever changed the course of Ethan's young life. They spoke about the months that followed, filled with grueling physical therapy sessions, endless surgeries, and sleepless nights of recovery. But more than that, they spoke of the emotional toll it had taken on Ethan. At just 12 years old, he had faced more pain and loss than most people experience in a lifetime. Ethan's body bore the physical scars of the accident, but it was the weight on his spirit that seemed the hardest to mend. The light in his eyes, once vibrant and full of boyish curiosity, had dimmed to a faint, flickering ember. It was as if the spark that had once fueled his dreams was now struggling to survive. Overshadowed by the weight of his new reality, Trump glanced over at Ethan as the staff finished speaking. The boy sat stiffly in his wheelchair, his small hands gripping the armrests tightly as though they were the only things anchoring him to the present. His shoulders slumped slightly, his posture speaking volumes about the emotional burden he carried. Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the floor, avoiding the commotion around him. He hadn't said a word since Trump entered, and his silence felt almost louder than anything else in the room. Sensing the heaviness in the boy's demeanor, Trump shifted his chair closer. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he moved slowly, deliberately, lowering himself to one knee so that his eyes were level with Ethan's. The former president placed one hand gently on the armrest of the wheelchair, his presence steady and reassuring. The room seemed to hold its breath as Trump waited, allowing the silence to settle before finally breaking it with a voice that was warm and steady. "Ethan," he began, his tone carrying both strength and gentleness, "you are a very special person. I can see the strength in you, more strength than you probably even realize. Is there something you'd like to ask me?" For a moment, it seemed as though Ethan might not answer. His fingers tightened around the armrests, his knuckles turning white as he held on as if for dear life. His small frame trembled slightly under the weight of emotions he couldn't yet voice. The air in the room grew heavier, charged with unspoken tension. But then, slowly, Ethan lifted his head. His eyes, filled with shadows of doubt and pain, met Trump's unwavering gaze. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't just pain in Ethan's eyes. It was a storm of emotions. There was longing, uncertainty, despair, and buried beneath it all, a fragile glimmer of hope. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice barely more than a whisper as he asked, "Mr. Trump, do you think that in heaven, I'll be able to walk again?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The hum of therapy equipment seemed to fade into the background, leaving the room in profound silence. Every eye turned toward the boy and the man kneeling before him. Trump's gaze didn't waver. He held Ethan's eyes with a look of deep understanding, as if he could see not just the boy's struggles, but the countless others like him who faced their battles silently every day. Ethan's lips trembled as he continued, his voice breaking slightly under the weight of his words. "I think if I go to heaven, I'll finally be free. I won't have to sit in this wheelchair anymore. I'll run. I'll jump. I'll live without pain." He paused, his small shoulders shaking as a single tear slid down his cheek. His voice dropped even lower, trembling with raw vulnerability that pierced the hearts of everyone present. "But right now, I don't know if I want to stay here anymore." His words lingered in the air, heavy and unfiltered, as though he had poured out every ounce of pain he'd been carrying. The staff exchanged quiet, solemn glances, unsure of how to respond. Even the other children in the room, who had been chatting and laughing moments earlier, fell silent. Their young faces reflected a mix of empathy and sorrow that mirrored the depth of Ethan's struggle. Trump, however, didn't look away. His gaze remained steady, locked on Ethan with an intensity that was neither overwhelming nor patronizing. His expression conveyed something rare, complete, unwavering presence. In that moment, it was clear that Ethan's question wasn't just about walking in heaven. It was about something far greater. It was about hope, about finding a reason to keep going when life felt unbearably heavy. It was a plea for understanding, a cry for help from a boy who was teetering on the edge of giving up. Trump inhaled deeply, his hands still resting gently on the armrest. He didn't rush to respond. There were no rehearsed words, no empty platitudes waiting on his tongue. What he was about to say would come from a place of deep conviction, a truth born of compassion and a belief in the power of hope. And as he prepared to speak, the room seemed to hold its breath, as if everyone present knew that what he said next would carry the weight of something profound, something that might just change the course of a young boy's life. Trump leaned in closer, lowering himself to Ethan's level, his movements deliberate and calm, radiating an unspoken message of patience and understanding. His eyes locked onto Ethan's with a steady, unwavering gaze that seemed to say, "I'm here with you. I'm listening." There was no rush in his demeanor, no sign of impatience, only a profound sense of empathy. Slowly, he sat down beside the boy, taking Ethan's small, trembling hands into his own. Ethan's hands were cold, their fragility a stark reminder of the battles he had endured for far too long. Trump's grip was firm but gentle, a silent assurance that the boy wasn't alone, that he was seen and valued. Trump's presence was steady, like an anchor amidst the storm of emotions swirling in the room. With a warm, steady voice that carried both strength and gentleness, Trump began to speak. "Ethan, you know, I believe heaven is a place where miracles happen, a place where pain doesn't exist, and where dreams as big as the sky come true." He paused for a moment, letting the words sink in. "When you're there, Ethan, you won't just walk, you'll fly. You'll run, you'll jump, and you'll chase after every dream you've ever had." But Trump's voice softened, his tone becoming even more deliberate. "I want you to remember something very important. Heaven isn't just some faraway place we go to after this life. Heaven can also begin right here, within your own heart, right now." Ethan's head tilted slightly at these words, his eyes lifting to meet Trump's once more. There was a flicker of something in his gaze, a mix of wonder, confusion, and the faintest glimmer of hope. Trump's words seemed to reach a part of Ethan that had been buried under layers of despair. Though it was clear the boy didn't fully understand them yet, Trump tightened his hold on Ethan's hands, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that reassured him, grounding him in this moment. The warmth in Trump's voice didn't waver as he continued, but now there was an edge of conviction that seemed to fill the entire room. "You don't need to leave this life to find heaven, Ethan. You don't need to let go of everything here to be free. Don't give up. My boy, your life, even with all its challenges, is a gift, a priceless gift." He paused again, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. "And do you know what? Every day you fight, every smile you share, every single dream you hold on to, those are miracles. Ethan, those are your miracles. And you, my boy, you're an angel in the stories of so many people around you. The room, which had been filled earlier with faint whispers and the hum of therapy equipment, now felt utterly still. Trump's voice was the only sound, resonating with a purpose that seemed to wrap itself around everyone present. His words weren't just for Ethan. They felt like they were for anyone who had ever doubted themselves, for anyone who had ever felt weighed down by the struggles of life. Ethan, Trump continued, his tone softer but no less impactful. Every small step you take, every little bit of effort you make, it's not just about changing your own life. It's about inspiring others, other kids, just like you, who might be feeling the same way. Kids who might think it's impossible to keep going. You, Ethan, are going to show them that it is possible. And not just kids, adults, too. The whole world needs to see your strength. Ethan blinked, his lips parting slightly as though he wanted to respond but couldn't quite find the words. His small hands, which had been clenched tightly in his lap earlier, now rested more easily in Trump's grasp. It was clear that Trump's words were sinking in, slowly but surely, like seeds taking root in soil that had long been barren. Trump leaned in just a little closer, his voice now low and personal, almost like a whisper shared between close friends. Ethan, I believe in you. I know you're stronger than you think you are, and you're not alone. I'll always remember you. I'll always believe in you. As the final words left Trump's lips, something shifted in Ethan's face. The heaviness that had weighed down his expression for so long seemed to lift, if only slightly. His lips quivered, and then, almost imperceptibly at first, they curved into a faint smile. It wasn't a big, beaming grin. It was small, delicate, and fragile, like the first rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds after a long, dark storm. But it was there, and it was enough. It was the first smile Ethan had shown in what felt like an eternity, and its warmth spread through the room like ripples across a still pond. The room seemed to breathe again. The tension that had hung in the air moments before dissipated, replaced by a quiet but profound sense of hope. It wasn't just Ethan who felt it. Every person in the room could sense the quiet but powerful transformation taking place. Ethan didn't say anything more, but he didn't need to. His eyes spoke volumes. They held a promise, a small, tentative promise that he would try, that he would hold on, that he would find his strength again. And in that moment, it felt as though the light that had taken root in one small boy's heart had spread outward, touching everyone around him. Trump's words seemed to cut through the heavy fog of despair that had surrounded Ethan for so long, reaching a place deep within the boy's heart where hope had once lived. It was as if those words lit a tiny spark in him, a flicker of light that had been buried under layers of sadness and defeat. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan's eyes began to shine. The change was subtle at first, like the first breath of air after being submerged for too long. But it was there, an undeniable shift. Ethan sat silently for a moment, processing what Trump had said. His hands, which had been tightly gripping the armrests of his wheelchair, relaxed slightly. The tension in his shoulders eased just a bit. He wasn't sure why, but something about the man's words made him feel lighter, as if the weight he carried wasn't quite so crushing anymore. After a long pause, Ethan finally broke the silence. His voice was still soft, still trembling, but this time, there was something new in it, a faint but unmistakable hint of determination. "So, what should I do to change this, sir?" he asked, his eyes cautiously meeting Trump's once more. Trump didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the question hang in the air for a moment, giving it the weight it deserved. Then, with a warmth that seemed to radiate from his very presence. He placed a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder. His grip was firm yet reassuring, a silent promise that he was there for the boy. "Ethan," Trump began, his voice steady and filled with encouragement. "Every great journey starts with a small spark of belief. Just a spark, that's all you need. Believe in yourself. Believe that you can overcome what's holding you back today. And when you believe, the whole world will rise up to meet you. Never stop believing, Ethan, because you were made to do extraordinary things. I can see it in you." Ethan sat quietly, his brows furrowing slightly as though he were trying to fully grasp the weight of those words. His young mind wrestled with the idea that he could be capable of something extraordinary, that the spark he felt in this moment could grow into something bigger. Trump, sensing the boy's hesitation, leaned in just a little closer, his voice becoming even more powerful as he continued. "Start with the smallest steps. Ethan, each day, try just a little harder than you did the day before. It doesn't have to be big, not at first, but every small effort counts. Let your legs feel the strength returning, little by little, moment by moment. Let your heart guide you. And don't you ever forget, you're not alone. There are millions of people in this world rooting for you. They're waiting to see what amazing things you'll accomplish." As Trump spoke, it was as if the energy in the room shifted. The staff and other children, who had been quietly watching from the sidelines, found themselves leaning in closer, captivated by the exchange. It wasn't just Ethan who felt the weight of Trump's words, it was everyone present. There was something undeniably inspiring about the way he spoke, as though he truly believed in the potential of the boy before him, in a way that made others believe it too. Ethan looked up at Trump, his lips pressing together as if to hold back a flood of emotions. He blinked a few times, his small frame trembling slightly, but this time it wasn't from fear or sadness. It was something else entirely. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, a faint but radiant smile began to spread across his face. It wasn't a big, toothy grin. It was small, delicate, and fragile, like the first bloom of a flower after a harsh winter. But it was there, and it was enough to change the entire atmosphere of the room. It was the kind of smile that carried a promise to try, to fight, to hold on to the tiny spark that had been reignited within him. In that moment, it wasn't just Ethan who felt the light of hope returning. It was everyone in the room, the staff, the other children, even Trump himself. The warmth of that moment wrapped around them all, as if the light that had been reignited in one small boy's heart was now spreading outward, touching everyone who had witnessed it. Ethan didn't say anything else, but he didn't need to. His eyes spoke louder than words ever could. They held a quiet determination, a resolve that hadn't been there before. He would try, he would fight, and for the first time in a long time, he would believe. The story of Ethan and his unforgettable encounter with Donald Trump didn't just stay within the walls of that rehabilitation center. Within days, it began to ripple outwards, first through the staff who had witnessed the moment and then to the wider world. As photos and video clips surfaced on social media and news outlets, the narrative quickly captured the hearts of millions. It wasn't just a story about a disabled boy in a wheelchair. It was something far greater. It became a living, breathing testament to the unyielding power of faith, hope, and resilience in the face of adversity. People weren't just moved by Ethan's question or Trump's heartfelt response. They were inspired by the spark that was rekindled in the young boy and the profound message it carried. The images from their conversation, Trump kneeling beside Ethan, the boy's faint but radiant smile, and the look of determination in his eyes, became symbols of hope for people across the globe. The words that Trump had spoken to Ethan resonated deeply with individuals from all walks of life, reminding them that heaven wasn't just a faraway destination to be reached after death. It could also be something created here on Earth, within the human heart, through effort, love, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of life. From this moment of connection, a global movement began to take shape. It started small, with letters and messages flooding into the rehabilitation center from people who had been touched by the story. Parents of children with disabilities wrote about how Ethan's courage had given them hope for their own families. Strangers from different corners of the world shared how the story had inspired them to keep fighting through their own struggles. Soon, this wave of support grew into something tangible. A movement called My Heaven was born. Inspired by Ethan's journey and his courageous question about life and purpose, the movement encouraged people, especially children with disabilities, to find their own version of heaven by embracing their strength and refusing to give up, no matter how overwhelming life's challenges might seem. Charitable organizations quickly rallied around the cause. Rehabilitation centers, advocacy groups, and compassionate individuals joined forces to support underprivileged and disabled children. Fundraisers were held, programs were launched, and communities were mobilized. Through these efforts, countless children gained access to therapy, education, and the encouragement they needed to rediscover their potential. Ethan's story became the centerpiece of the movement. His name was spoken with reverence, not just as a child who had overcome despair, but as a symbol of what was possible when faith and determination were nurtured. Ethan, who once doubted whether he even wanted to continue living, now stood as a beacon of hope for others. His small victories in the therapy room, each step, each effort, were celebrated far and wide as triumphs of the human spirit. As the movement grew, Trump was invited to speak about his encounter with Ethan during a public address. Standing before an audience of thousands, with millions more watching online, he reflected on that pivotal moment with emotion. Ethan reminded me of something so profound, that sometimes the smallest heroes have the biggest hearts. That little boy didn't just ask me about heaven. He showed me, and all of us, how to create heaven here on earth through faith, through courage, and through a refusal to give up. Ethan isn't just a remarkable child. He's a symbol of hope for all of us. And if he can fight, if he can find that spark within himself, then so can we all. The words struck a chord that reverberated far beyond the room where they were spoken. They became a rallying cry for people facing their own challenges, urging them to believe in their strength and to take those first, small steps toward their own victories. For Ethan, the boy who once wanted to leave it all behind in search of peace, the story had come full circle. Each time he returned to the therapy room, each time he tried just a little harder than the day before, he wasn't just reclaiming his own life. He was proving to the world that faith and human determination could overcome even the darkest of moments. Ethan's story serves as a reminder of the profound strength that resides within each of us, even when it feels as though hope is slipping away. In his darkest moment, a simple conversation sparked something incredible, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness, compassion, and encouragement can change a life. Ethan's courage and the heartfelt words of Donald Trump show us that sometimes all it takes is someone to truly see us, to hear us, and to believe in us to reignite the light within. We often think of miracles as extraordinary, faraway events, or believe that peace and happiness can only be found in some distant future or another world. But Ethan's journey teaches us a different lesson. Miracles can happen here, now, within us. They begin when we take even the smallest steps forward, when we refuse to give up, and when we choose to believe in the possibility of a better tomorrow. In Ethan's case, it wasn't just about learning to walk again. It was about finding the strength to keep going, to inspire others, and to remind the world that life, no matter how challenging, is a gift. Each smile he shares, every effort he makes, is a testament to the power of faith and determination. His story has become a beacon of hope for countless people, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, we can choose to fight, to believe, and to shine. To those who may feel weighed down by life's struggles, let Ethan's story remind you that you are not alone. There is always hope, even in the smallest of moments, and your strength, no matter how quiet or unseen, has the power to inspire those around you. May you always find courage in the smallest steps, strength in the toughest challenges, and hope in the darkest hours. May your heart remain open to the possibility of miracles, and may your spirit stay anchored in love and faith. Let Ethan's story inspire you to see that every moment holds the potential for growth, and every struggle is an opportunity to create your own version of heaven on earth. Remember, even when the road feels impossible, you have the power to shine and inspire others.